Masechet Baba Kama Daf Yod. We have a long braita that compares the relative strengths of each of the avot. Teno Rabbanan. Chomer beshor mibor, v'chomer bebor mibeshor. So we're going to have three paragraphs. The first one is comparing shor and bor. Chomer beshor mibebor. In what ways is an ox that gores more stringent than a pit? Shashor meshalem et hakofer. If an ox kills a person, then the owner of the ox is technically liable to capital punishment. However, there's a special law. This is the only case where someone liable to capital punishment can ransom himself. He pays an amount to the victim's heirs, and then he does not get the capital punishment. That's true for a shor, not true for a bor. If my pit kills someone, then I cannot redeem myself with money. If my shor goes and kills an ayvid, a special law that I have to pay 30 selah to the slave's master. That is not true of a bor that kills someone. A shor is unique in that it can stand trial. A shor that kills, he has to go to court, and the court will decide, oh, this ox killed someone, it deserves capital punishment. Once it gets that, then one cannot get any benefit from that shor, because that's it, it's a shor haniskal. It can't get any benefit while it's alive or while it's dead. That is true only for a shor. A bor does not get judged and go to court, and so you don't say a bor is a sur b'hana'ah. Even if a bor kills someone, you can still go and use the bor to hold something for you. And also, a shor is unique in that it moves around and causes damage. It has a mind of its own and travels and goes onto someone else's field, or goes and gores someone, whereas a bor is stationary. And now the other way around. Chomer bebor mi beshor. She'abor techilat asiyato lenezek umuad metechilato ma she'en ken beshor. Bor is more stringent than an ox goring, because a pit, the minute that is created, it already is dangerous, right from the beginning. Whereas a shor, not from the moment it's born is it dangerous. If you take an ox and you take care of it correctly, corral it, restrain it, it won't be dangerous. And also, a bor is mu'ad from the very beginning. There's no distinction between a bor tam and a bor mu'ad. A bor, the first time it causes damage, I have to pay the full amount. Not so with a shor that gores. The first 3 times, I have to only pay half. And so these are stringencies of a bor, and not so with a shor. That's paragraph number 1. Paragraph number 2. Chomer beshor mi be'esh, chomer be'esh mi beshor. Now comparing an ox goring to fire is stringent in some ways, and fire is also stringent in some ways. Chomer beshor mi be'esh. In what ways is an ox goring more stringent than fire? Shashor meshalem kofer. Again, like before, if an ox kills someone, the owner of the ox is technically liable to capital punishment, but can redeem himself. If I light a fire and it goes and kills someone, well, the law there depends. Let's say I light someone's house on fire, and they can run out the back door, and they decide not to run out the back door, and they're killed, I am not liable, even though I set their house on fire. They had a way out. On the other hand, if they have no way out, if I tied up the person first and then set his house on fire, then I am liable for murder, capital punishment. But either way, I would not pay a ransom. The ransom is a law particular to an ox goring. An ox that kills a slave has to pay 30 shekel to the owner of the slave. That's unique to ox, does not apply to fire. A shor can be put on trial and deemed if it killed someone or was involved in a sin of bestiality, it gets capital punishment, and then it's prohibited from deriving any benefit from it. Fire cannot be put on trial. Even if fire goes and destroys something, I can still go and take from that fire and use it to cook a barbecue. If I deliver my ox if I put it in the hands of a cheresh shoteh v'katan to safeguard for me, and it goes and causes damage, I am liable. I shouldn't have put it in the hands of cheresh shoteh v'katan. I should have known that the short is a dangerous thing. So I am liable, which is not true for fire. The distinction we saw above is that if you leave a short alone, it will go and cause damage. So I'm directly responsible. Whereas if you leave a fire alone, and I just put it in a safe place, the fire itself will not cause damage. It's only because the cheresh went and took this fire and moved it. So it's the cheresh's fault, not my fault. And so I am not liable if I entrust a fire in the hands of cheresh shoteh v'katan. The other way around, chomer be'esh mi beshor, sha'esh mu'adet metechilata, mashen ken beshor. Fire also has a stringency over shor, that a fire is mu'ad from the beginning. There's no such thing as an esh tam and an esh mu'ad. I am liable to pay the full amount of a fire that I started and cause damage even from the first time, whereas a shor, I only have to pay half for the first 3 times that it gores. Chomer mi be'esh mi bebor, v'chomer bebor mi be'esh. And now the third paragraph, we're comparing 3 things. So there's 3 ways, there's 3 pairs in there. And the last one's comparing fire that's more stringent to board in some ways, and board is more stringent into fire. The board, as soon as I make it, it is already dangerous. Whereas fire is not necessarily dangerous. Usually, most fires are not dangerous. They're controlled. They're in a certain spot. I make a bonfire over here. It's only dangerous because I allow it to, I move it or allow it to spread. Board, if I entrust it to a cheresh shoteh v'katan, here, watch this board, I am liable, because a board is inherently dangerous, and so if they just do nothing, it will cause damage. That's not true of fire, where if I entrust the fire with cheresh shoteh v'katan, and it's in its place, right, and it will eventually kind of go out and become less dangerous, and so I am not liable. The damage happens because the cheresh moved it to a different place, and so therefore the cheresh had to get involved in order for it to cause damage. And I, the owner of the fire, am not responsible, whereas for board, I would be responsible. Now, that's all one way. The other way, in what way is a fire more stringent? A fire moves and causes damage as it moves. Not true for a board that is stationary. And a fire, I have to pay for its damage, whether it consumes something that is normally used for fuel, like wood or oil, and whether it consumes something that is not regularly used for fuel, like vessels or clothing. Don't usually make a fire with those items. Nevertheless, if I light a fire and it goes and destroys your woodshed, I'm liable. If it goes and destroys your clothing closet, your pantry closet, and destroys your food or your vessels, I'm liable no matter what. No matter what it burns. That's not true for board. The majority opinion is that board, I am liable if it causes damage to your animal, but not if it causes damage to vessels. Okay, that is the end of the Baraita. And now we ask, hold on, there's some things that we seem to have left out. So we made a distinction over here between vessels and things that a fire consumes, and we're assuming that it means vessels here. Now we're wondering, what about the first paragraph, where it says that an ox is more stringent than board, because an ox, I'm liable if my ox gores vessels, it goes and breaks your vase, I am gores it and breaks it, I am liable. But that's not true for board, because we just saw we just mentioned the majority opinion is that board, I am not liable for vessels. So how come that's not added in the first paragraph? So we answer, in fact, this Braita is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, the fourth generation, Tana, not the Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, in the fifth generation, the Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai, and he has the minority opinion and says that a board, that if vessels fall into the board and break, I am liable for them. And so that's why I didn't leave it out, because in fact, one is liable for vessels, both for shod and board. There is no difference between them. All right, that would explain it. However, then that creates a problem in the third paragraph. Right, now we're re-quoting the third paragraph. It says a fire is more stringent than a board, because a fire moves and a board doesn't. And a fire, I have to pay whether it consumes something used for fuel or not used for fuel, whereas that's not true for a board, which I am liable only for some items but not others. Now, what does it mean? Something that is fitting for it. I explained that as used for fuel. But what is it talking about in particular? Something that's fitting for it is wood, right? Because that's what you usually feed a fire that you want if you want to make a bonfire. Well, something that is not fitting for it, meaning it's not generally used for fuel, are vessels. I don't take my bowls and cups and use that to make a fire generally. So, which is not true for board. So fire, I am liable no matter what it consumes, and that's not true for board, right? And based on this understanding of the distinction between what's used for fuel and not used for fuel, board would not be liable if it breaks vessels in out. And if you say that this entire Baraita is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, well, then this wouldn't make sense, because Rabbi Yehuda said that one is liable for a board that breaks vessels. And then how would you explain this third paragraph over here? So instead we go back. In fact, the Mishnah follows the opinion of Rabbanan. And so, right, we leave the third paragraph as is. And so the third paragraph makes sense that a fire is liable to all things, but board, one is not liable for vessels. And really, you should have mentioned that in the first paragraph also, that a shod is liable for breaks vessels and a board is not. But the Tana left out some items. It's not a comprehensive list. Okay, now we have a rule. If, in fact, there could be things that lists are not comprehensive, but if a Tana is going to leave something out, then it's not going to just leave one thing out. It's going to leave at least two things out. And to make sure you're not going to say etc. if you have only one more thing to add. So if you want to say it's leaving things out, my shied, the shied, what else is it leaving out that it would make sense to leave out this? And the answer is shied tamun. It leaves out a concealed item. The law is that if I light something on fire, and let's say a pile of hay, and there's something underneath, a treasure box that you hid under the hay that is not visible, I am not liable when it comes to fire. And so this is something that is a stringency for other items and a leniency for fire, and yet this is not mentioned in the Baraita. So you see that, in fact, it is leaving out multiple items. And so it's not a comprehensive list, and that explains why it left out the law of a board that is less stringent than shor. That's all one answer. Or a second answer, in fact, the whole Baraita is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, and it didn't leave anything out. It's a comprehensive list, and so that's why it didn't distinguish board, shod and board in the first paragraph, because both of them are liable for vessels, as Rabbi Yehuda said. Now, what about the third paragraph? When it says that a fire is liable both for things that are fitting to it and not fitting to it, that wasn't coming to include vessels. Vessels are part of what's fitting for it. Because that's something that it can cause damage to and destroy, right? You throw vessels into a fire, it will destroy them. So that's something that will be consumed. Rather, the end ra'ula is coming to include if I set fire to your plowed field or singe your stones. In other words, you have an empty field, you plowed the field, but things aren't growing on it. If I set fire to your field that has things all grown on it, then obviously I'm liable. I destroyed your produce. But a empty field that is like ready, it's plowed and ready to grow, and I burn it, it will ruin the field. Even though you can't burn soil, it's not like the soil will go away and be destroyed, but it's gonna ruin the nutrients in the soil and dry it out, and it won't be good anymore. Similarly, if I burn your wall that's made out of stone, even though the wall will remain intact, right? Stones don't burn. Nevertheless, the wall will become weakened by being burnt. And so these are two types of damage that are particular to a fire. Only a fire could do. A board couldn't do that. I can't throw all of your field or your bricks into a board, right? That's not going to happen. So this is a particular type of damage that's different from damages that a board can do, that only a fire can do. That's what it's coming to include. But in fact, vessels are included in both categories, both a fire and a board, and shod, for that matter, where one would be liable if it destroys vessels. So that's the second way to explain this baraita, either according to the Banan or according to the Yehuda. Matkif la Rav Asher, but Rav Asher has an objection to this last statement. Litne homer beshor mi bebor, shashor chiyeh bo shor pesule hamuktashin, ma she'en ken bebor. Rav Asher asks, you should add something else too, that a shor has a stringency over a board, because a shor that injures or kills a pesule muktashin. This means an animal that was sanctified to be a korban, a sacrifice, and then it got a blemish in it, so it can't be used anymore. So we will redeem that animal for a new animal, and this one that was blemished, I'm allowed to slaughter it and eat it. However, its carcass, if it's nevela, cannot be fed to the dogs. So in other words, even though I redeemed it and it could use it as a regular animal, but it retains some of its sanctity. And I can't just degrade it by feeding it to the dogs. Now, in this, there's a special law regarding this, that if a shor goes and gores such an animal, I will have to pay. But if such an animal falls into a board, I do not have to pay. This law is related to the pasuk that says "V'hamet yihye lo," and from which we learn that he keeps the met, meaning he can use it for anything. But if there's limitation on what he can use it for, like he can't feed it to a dog, then the law will not apply. So Rav Asher asks, how come we don't mention this stringency of a shor over a board? Now, this is not a problem for the banan, because we already established that for the banan, this is not a comprehensive list. We already saw a couple of things that it left out. So, okay, so it leaves out this also. But in fact, you're right. This would be an eligible example. But according to the Yehuda, the second answer we just brought, we said according to this, it is a comprehensive list. So how come this example is not on the list? And the answer is Shier Dash Benido. You're right, even according to the Yehuda, it's not a comprehensive list. There are things left out. And that's not the only thing left out, because you need at least two things that are left out. The other one would be if an ox came and trampled someone else's field. And so in this case, similar to the fire before, even though it didn't actually destroy things, because it's just soil, but after you plow a field, it has all nice furrows, and he ruined the shape of the field. And that's considered a stringency of a shor over a board. And so it didn't mention that also, even though that's also true. A board can't ruin, a field can't fall into a board and have it ruined. Now, imishum dash beniro lav shiurahu datanya sheken darko lelechul hazik. But then we answer, this is no. If that's the only thing that left out, that would not be a good example. That's not something that's considered left out, because the Baraita already says that the way of an ox is that it travels and causes damage. And this is one of the typical ways that an ox travels and causes damage. It's not only by goring with its horn physically, but also by moving things around as it steps on it, and ruining a field in that way. So really that would be already included in it. And so really we only have therefore one example of something that is left out according to Rabbi Yehuda. We now go on to explain the next phrase in the Mishnah. Hichsharti b'miksat nizko. If I facilitate part of the damage, I am nevertheless liable to pay for the entire amount of the damage. Let's see what cases we're talking about. Tenor Banan. Hichsharti b'miksat nizko. Chabti b'tashlomen nizko. Ke'echsher kol nizko. Kesad. What is the case where that would fulfill this requirement here? What is the situation that this case is talking about, that if I facilitate part of the damage, I am responsible for all of the damage as if I facilitated its entirety. How so? Person A digs a pit that's 9 tefachim deep. A 9 tefach deep pit can only cause damage, but is not deep enough to kill an animal. And then a person B comes and fills and digs out yet one more tefach and makes it 10. And then an animal falls into it and dies. So only person B is liable, even though he only dug one tefach, and the other and person A dug 9. Nevertheless, the last person, so that's B'ikshad b'miksat nizko, he was only he only partially facilitated the damage. He really only did 1/10 of the work. Nevertheless, he is responsible for the whole thing because he's the one that made it add up to 10. Udela could it be Tanya hachofer bor tisha ubacher v'ishlemol asara acharon hayav. Rabbi Omer acharon lemita achar shenehem linzakin. Now this Braita, and I mean the Mishnah also, if it's assuming that this is the Braita that is talking about, is not the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, because here we see there's machloket about it. As a Braita says, Tanakama teaches that someone who digs a pit that's 9 tefachim, and someone else comes and makes it 10, the second person is the one that's liable. Only, and so liable to the entire amount, 100%, the first person is nothing. Rabbi, however, says it depends. If the animal dies, then the second guy is fully liable, because a 9-inch pit doesn't kill, a 10-inch pit kills, so the guy that made it 10 is fully liable. But if it only caused damage, in that case, both of them are responsible, because even a 9-inch tefach pit will cause damage, and so they will split the amount of the damage. Could be that they split it depending on how much they dug, 9/10 and 1/10, right? But nevertheless, they do split it. So this is Rabbi is not the same as the Baraita and the Mishnah, where it says only the last one is liable for everything. Okay, that's the one opinion. However, Rapapa Amar Lemita v'Dibrei Kol. Rapapa says actually, I'd rather say that the Baraita is universal, and even the Rabbi would agree with it. And we're only talking about if the animal dies. Right? We're assuming a case where animal dies, not a case where it would only cause damage. And so here you have two opinions. One is the anonymous, the Stamat de Gemara, that says that this Baraita is only according to Chachamim, but not Rabbi. And the Papa says, no, I'd rather limit the Baraita to a case where the animal dies, and that way it could be according to everybody. So here it's a machloket between anonymous and the Papa. That's all one version, but there's another version of the discussion. Ikadamre lema de la kedebi amara Papa lemita v'dibrei kol. In this version, the anonymous voice asks, well, it looks like, is this Baraita not according to the B? And Abba says, yes, it can be the B, and it's only talking about a case where it dies, and even the B would agree in such a case. In the Ika Da'amre version, there's no machloket, it's just a question, but Abba answers. There is no other stam voice that says that this Baraita is limited to one opinion. Okay, Matkif la Rabbi Zera. Now, Rabbi Zera has a challenge to this explanation of the Baraita. The Baraita gave one example of where a person who only partially facilitates is nevertheless liable for everything. And he asks, Vetu leka, is that the only example you could think of? Shouldn't there be more examples? V'ha'ika, and so you should have listed other examples, as like the following one. Masar shor la hamisha, the example we had was for a case of bor. But shouldn't there also be examples for other types of damages? I have a shor. I entrusted it to 5 people to watch it. Right? It needed 5 people because it's a pretty wild ox, and one of them was negligent. Right? One of them was texting while watching an ox. Not a good idea, and it went and caused damage. That person who was negligent is responsible for the entire amount. Now, so that would be a case also where a person is only partially facilitates because there's 4 other people there, and yet he's liable to the entire thing. So really, the Braita should have included this example. Now we ask, Hechidame, what exactly would be the case? If it's a case where it's a very, very wild ox, and without all 5 people, it would not have been safeguarded, then obviously he is responsible fully because he caused it to be able to cause damage. And so that would be a simple case. You wouldn't even have to teach it. So maybe it's talking about the opposite, where it didn't need all 5 people to watch it, right? It was extra, and really 4 people could have watched it sufficiently. Well, in that case, what did he do? He didn't do anything wrong, right? Because the animal should have been able to be safeguarded without him, and so therefore he should not be liable. And so either way, this would not be a case, and so we reject the challenge of Rabbi Zerah and say, you know what, there's not an equivalent case for a shor, because it's either this or that. Either it's obvious or he's not responsible. So that's why we don't have such a case. Okay, matkif la Rav Sheshat v'haika marbe b'chavila. Rav Sheshat says, why not add a case, an example that involves fire? If there's a fire, a small fire that's just there, and then I come and I add fuel to the fire, right? Literally, add a bundle of wood to the fire, and then it spreads and causes damage. So even though the fire was there before, but the person that adds the bundle of wood would be solely responsible. So that's a case of being only partially facilitating and yet being fully responsible. And now also we ask, Hechidameh, what exactly would be the case? If that fire would not have spread without the extra fuel, then obviously the one that added the fuel is totally responsible. The first guy just made a small bonfire in his safe place, so it wouldn't be responsible. But so fine, we'll say that even without the added fuel, it already was big enough that it would get out of control and spread without him. In that case, what did the guy who added the bundle of fires do? It was going to destroy it anyway, so he should not be responsible. So you know what? That's not a case either. That's why the Braita did not include a fire case. Okay, now try again. Matkif la papa. V'haika had detanya. Chamisha sheyashvu al safsal echad ve'lo shebaruhu. Uba echad ve'yashav alav ushbaro. Hacharon hayav. V'amar Rav Papa kegon papa bar abba. All right, this is kind of a slapstick situation. You have 5 people on the bench. Here's a nice Roman bench, and so they're all sitting it, and they're just fine. It didn't break. But then one added person comes and sits on it and breaks. Rav Papa here is quoting a Baraita. Unlike the other 2 questions before, they were just making up theoretical cases. Rav Papa actually has a Baraita. So we're going to have to explain this one way or another. Anyway, Rav Papa said, right, this would make the most sense if the last person that sat on it was someone like Papa bar Abba, who was a very large, heavy person. And so he came and sat on it and then caused it to break. So even though there were 5 people on it already, it's only the last person, in this case someone like Papa bar Abba, would be fully responsible. And even though he only partially facilitated its breaking, nevertheless he's totally responsible. And so this is a case that the Braita should have mentioned. Now we ask here too, if it's a case where without the added big guy at the end, it would not have broken, then obviously he's responsible fully, right? Because he totally broke it. And if it's a case where even without him, it would have broken anyway, right? There's 5 people sitting on it, but in a few minutes, a little while, it would have broken anyway without him. So then he didn't really do anything because it was going to break no matter what. So, and therefore, that's why the Braita didn't mention this case. Okay, so we could end here as we did in the previous two, except that in this case, Rav Papa actually quoted a Braita. So we say, Sof Sof Matita Hechab Metarsa. Rav Papa's Braita, you still have to explain somehow. You can't just leave this off. I mean, beforehand we had an interest to resolve the questions because we want to explain why the original Braita has only one case of the board. But now, this itself is a Braita, and it says that the last big guy that sits on it is liable. So we have to figure out what this Braita is talking about. So, La Sericha de Belaviu have mitbar bitre sha'e, pashta itbar bechada sha'a, ve'amrile ilav at have yatbinan tefe purta bekaiminan. We're talking about a case where without this added guy at the end, it would have broken eventually in 2 hours with the 5 guys sitting on it. But now with the 6th guy sitting on it, it would break in 1 hour. It's not going to last longer. Now the 5 people sitting on it can say, listen, if not for you, we were planning on sitting here just a few more minutes. We were going to sit another 10, 20 minutes, and we were going to get up. And therefore, if it was just for us, it would not have broken. But now that you came and sat on it, that's why it broke. So therefore, you are responsible. Now, this would not be obvious because in this case, in fact, it would have broken even without the 6th guy. But since they could have possibly gotten up, and they could say, we were planning on getting up, therefore, it is in fact the full responsibility of the 6th guy. So he is responsible, but this case is not obvious, and so that's why this Braita has to teach it to us. Now we ask, Velema lehu ilav atun bedidi lahava mitbar. But the 6th guy could say, if not that you guys continued to sit on the bench, it would not have broken just because of me, even though he's a fat guy. It would not have broken just because of him. And so his point is, listen, I sat on the bench, you all should have gotten up immediately, and so that it wouldn't break. And so therefore, you are all partially responsible, and you should share in the liability. So that seems to be a good claim. So we have to readjust the situation. La sericha de behade de semich behu tevar. We're talking about a case where this big guy, he didn't sit on the bench, but rather leaned on the other 5 people in such a way that they would not be able to get up. So he prevented them from getting up. But his added weight is what now, and it would have broken anyway if they stayed on it long enough. But now his added weight made it break faster. And so, in that case, he is responsible. Now we ask about that. Well, Peshita, isn't that obvious? That he's the main one responsible because he's the one that is pushing them down, holding them down, so they couldn't have gotten up, and then it breaks right immediately or sooner than it would have. So isn't that an obvious case where he would be responsible? So we explain, Mahodetema kocho lav kegufo dameh, kamashmalan de kocho kegufo dameh, de kolecha de gufo tabar, kocho nami tabar. It's in fact not obvious because I might have said that a person's force is not equivalent to their body. And maybe here it's indirect. He's pushing down on the people, making them heavier, but he's not pushing directly onto the bench. He's not sitting on the bench. So it's not that his body is pushing down on the bench. It's only his force that's pushing down on the people that are on the bench. And so maybe it's more indirect. So I might have thought that he's not responsible or less responsible. And so therefore, we need this Braita to teach us that his force on the people is the same as his body sitting on the bench. And as long as his body would break it, so his force pushing on them, that breaks it, also is considered his direct responsibility, and he is liable. Okay, good. So now we explain the Rav Papa Braita. Now we ask, V'tuleka, v'ha'ika ha'detanya, hiku 10 bnei adam be'aser maklot, ben bebat achat ben beze achar ze umet, kulan peturin. The Braita should have included the following case of a person that you have a victim, and there's 10 people that have 10 sticks, and they all beat him. And it doesn't matter whether they all beat him at the same time or one guy beats him and stops. The second guy comes and beats him and goes away. And he dies at the end. All of them are peturim according to Tanakama. So they're all patur. That's Takama. Because each one by himself did not kill him. Right, so a tenth of a beating did not kill him. Only the added beatings of all 10 killed him, so no one person is responsible. However, Rabbi Yehuda ben Betara Omer, Ben Betara agrees that if they all beat him at the same time, then you cannot put responsibility on any one of them, so they're patur. But if they went serially, one after the other, then the last one is the one who dealt the final fatal blow. And right, he hastened his death. And therefore, the last one is in fact liable. So here we have a case, according to the Yehuda ben Betara only, where you have someone, the last person, who partially facilitated the death, and yet he's responsible for the entire thing. He gets capital punishment, even though he only hit him the same amount as the first 9. And so this should be something that the Braita adds. So we add b'ketalak l'kamayde. No, the Braita is talking about paying damages, not capital punishment. That's one answer. Or a second answer is that the Braita wanted to bring clear-cut cases that are agreed by everyone, and not something that's subject to machloket. Now we ask, Vela, okim nan de la kedebi. Or is that true that you don't want to bring anything that is subject to a machloket? But up above, we said that this baraita is not the opinion of Rabbi. Remember, that was only in the not ikad in the anan ikad amre. And according to the ikad amre, the Tanaka, the anonymous voice, only asked the question, and Papa says, Papa said no, it could be even according to Rabbi. But in the first version of the answer, where there's a disagreement between the Papa and the anonymous voice, and the anonymous voice said that this is talking about all cases, both if the pit caused damage or death, and it's not the opinion of Rabbi. Now, according to that answer, we included this case of the pit, that someone digs 9, the next person digs 10, even though the law would only be according to Rabbanan and not according to Rabbi in Nizakin. And so we answer to that, to look at Rabbi v'Chabbanan mokminan, Rabbi Yehuda ben Betara v'la Rabbanan la mokminan. No, in that case it's different, because we're still following the majority. So it's fine, it's okay to include cases in this baraita that follow the majority, even if it's against a minority opinion of Rabbi. But in this case, you're telling me we should include this case of the 10 people that hit someone, even though it's only a minority opinion and not a banan. No, that we're not including in the baraita. So the editor of this baraita chose to include only cases that would be agreed upon by the majority, and not include a case that was only the minority. All right, so in the end, we have only one example of such a case, but we got to see a lot of other potential cases that, at least according to some opinions, would also be cases where one person, even though he only facilitated part of it, still is liable to the entire thing. We now finish with the next part of the Mishnah. Chavti betashlume nisko. Chavti benisko lakatane ela betashlume nisko. The Mishnah said that someone who facilitates part of it has to pay for the payment of the damage. Now, it could have said more simply, he is liable to the damages. He has to pay for the damages. Why does it say tashlume nisko, the fulfillment of the damages? It must be teaching us another law. Now, tashlumim, it can mean payment, but it also can come from the meaning of lehashlim, to complete the payment. And so this extra word here is teaching us that if I cause damage and I kill your ox, now the carcass of the ox is worth something already. I don't have to pay for that amount, but rather only the difference between the value of the live animal and of the dead animal. But otherwise, you keep the carcass, and therefore I only have to lehashlim, the nezek, to complete whatever complete the amount of the damage I caused, but I don't actually have to pay for the entire thing because you keep the carcass. Okay, so that's what the extra word is teaching us. Tenena leha, and in fact we have a braita that says this explicitly, the Tanur Banan. Tashlume nezek melamed shabe'alim mitapelim banevela. The phrase tashlume nezek means filling in, completing the amount of the damage, and that teaches that the owner of the victim, the owner of the victim ox, the injured party, they take the nevela and they have to deal with it. They tend to it. In other words, they have to go and sell it, whatever they're going to do with it. it's their responsibility. This is kind of like if someone comes and totals my car. They don't have to pay for the entire amount of the car, because even the totaled car is worth something for parts, but it's not their responsibility. I can't say, okay, here, take the total car and pay me the full amount. I'm the one that has to go and sell the part of it, or go to insurance company to get that part of it, and then we'll let him know what the difference is between them. He only has to pay the difference, but the victim is the one that has to deal with the carcass. All right, so that is the law. What is the source? We're going to see 3 different Pesukim as a source, and then we're going to ask, why do we need all 3 of them? Pasuk in Vayikra is talking about a human who kills someone else's animal. So if a person kills someone else's animal, says yeshalemena, which literally means just has to pay for it, but we're reading it not as pay for it, but yashlimena, he has to complete the payment. What do you mean? Why doesn't he have to pay for the whole thing? Because the owner of the victim ox keeps the carcass. That's source number 1 from a human killing an animal. Rav Kana amar mehacha im tarof yitaref ibeu ad haterefa lo yeshalem ad haterefa yeshalem terefa asma lo yeshalem. This is talking about a case of a shomer sachar, a paid watchman who is neglectful, and then another animal comes and tears my animal into pieces that you were supposed to safeguard. So the shomer sachar is responsible. Now, literally, the pasuk says, if it's torn to pieces, let him bring a witness. Yavi'ehu ad. But we're rereading it just like we read this word. We're reading it to say ad, right? Meaning until the terefa, he has to pay. He only has to pay from the full amount of the live ox up until, meaning down till, the value of the carcass. But the cow carcass itself, the shomer sachar does not have to pay, because the owner of it, the owner of the carcass, who entrusted it to the watchman, keeps the carcass. So in that case, the owner is the victim. The shomer sachar is the responsible party, so he only has to pay the difference, because it says ad. Third source, this is pasuk from Shemot, talking about one ox killing another ox, and says that the owner of the ox that gored has to pay for pay for the damages. But then the pasuk ends and says, and the carcass shall be his. Now it's not really clear who is the his referring to, but he's Chizkiah is assuming it's the nizak, is the victim, keeps the carcass, and therefore the perpetrator only has to pay for the difference. Chizkiah didn't only say it himself, he also has a braita. The braita quotes the same pasuk and says it goes to the victim, and then it asks, which is the usual rhetorical formula of a midrash halacha. You're assuming it goes to nizak. How do you know? Maybe it goes to the mazik, and it ends. No, it cannot have been that. Now we want to elaborate. What do you mean? My lo kachaya. Why couldn't it have been that? Why can't you read it as such? V'met yeh lo, that it goes to the mazik, and then the mazik has to pay a full amount. Amar Abaye, Isal kadatech nevela de mazik havya lichtov lechamana shor tachat shor v'lishtok v'amet yeh lo lamali shemamina lanizak. Abaye says, because if the nevela went to the mazik, then the pasuk should have just said, the mazik has to pay a new ox for the ox that he killed. He has to pay a totally new ox, and then just say that, and it would have been obvious. Instead, by saying he gets the carcass, it's the less obvious choice. The less obvious choice is that the owner of the victim keeps the carcass, and then the payment is not a full shor tachat shor. So the fact that the Torah has to add a phrase to say, he gets the carcass. Well, he gets the carcass. The chidush would be if the victim gets the carcass, and therefore the perpetrator does not pay the full amount of a new shor instead of the previous shor. So that's how we learn it. Good. Usiricha. Now I need all 3 of these pesukim. They're not actually arguing with each other. If it pasuk only said regarding a human being who kills an ox, and he doesn't have to pay a full amount, right? He gets the carcass is given over, is already partial payment. I would say he gets a leniency. All these are leniencies for the perpetrator, because he doesn't have to pay the full amount and doesn't have to deal with the carcass. So I would say it's unusual for a human being to kill an animal, and that's why we can be lenient for him. But I might have thought for shomer sachar to be negligent is more common, and so there I would have thought that shomer sachar has to pay for the entire thing, and he takes the carcass and he has to deal with it. So that's why I need the pasuk regarding shomer sachar. If I only had the pasuk regarding shomer sachar mishum dememela, in that case, it's actually he doesn't cause the damage directly. He's just negligent, and then a wild animal comes and eats it. So maybe we should be lenient on him, and he doesn't have to deal with the carcass. But if I go and actually with my hands directly kill an animal, then I should have to pay for the full amount, and I have to deal with the carcass. And that's why I have the first pasuk to teach me that even in this case, the carcass goes to the nizak. In fact, those two, I would say fine. In those two, we can be lenient for different reasons. One, because it's not common, and the other because he doesn't do it directly. But when one ox gores another, that happens often, and also it's direct. It's not the owner himself that's doing it, but it's his own animal that gores another, not just because of negligence, but because it's his own extension, his own property that goes and does it. I might think that in that case he would be fully responsible. So that's why I need the third pasuk to say that even there he's not fully responsible, only has to pay the difference. And if I only had the third pasuk regarding one ox killing another, mishum de mamona kamazika, maybe I might say maybe we're lenient for him because it's only his property, his ox, that causes damage. But in the first case, where the human himself goes with his own hands and kills another animal, maybe he should not get the leniency and he should have to pay for the entire amount and deal with the carcass himself. And that's why I need all three pesukim. Amar le Rav Kahana le Rav Ela Tama de Katav Lachamana V'Amet Yelo Halav Hachi Amar Hava Amina Nebela de Mazik Havia. So Rav Kahana asked Rav regarding the third pasuk that was said by Chizkiyah. You're telling me that the only reason why we say that the animal goes to the nizak is because the pasuk says V'Hamet Yelo. But if not for that pasuk, I would have thought that the mazik has to keep and deal with the carcass, and then he has to pay for the entire amount. That doesn't make sense because let's say the perpetrator has many torn animals from other places. He just has them around. And if he wants to use that as payment for damages that he does, right, unrelated to those animals, he should be allowed, because after all, we mentioned above that the word yashiv, to pay recompense, means that one can pay not only cash or best land, but even something that's the equivalent of cash, something that can be sold, even bran, even something cheap. So therefore, the mazik, no matter what, he can use anything he wants to pay, and he can even use other carcasses. So all the more so here, if the mazik decides he wants to, he can say, listen, the carcass, keep that as the beginning of my payment, and then I'll pay you only the difference. So therefore, it would be the prerogative of the mazik to tell the nizak to keep the carcass, even without the pasuk. So what do I need the pasuk in such a case of damages? And the answer is lasricha ela livchat nebela. It would make a difference when it comes to the diminishing value of the carcass. The longer you leave a carcass, the less it's worth. The minute that it's killed, it's still nice and fresh, so it can be used for something. It was killed, not shechita. You can't eat it, but a Jew can't eat it. But you can feed it. You can sell it to others. And so, let's say right now when it's killed, it's still fresh. It's worth $50. But then, after another day, it's going to be only worth $25. So this would make a difference, because if you say it belongs to the nizak, which is what the pasuk says, that means the nizak already has $50 paid, and so the mazik only has to pay the difference. But if it goes to the mazik, then it's the mazik's, he owns it. And then by time he goes to court and gets an evaluation of what the full damages is worth, and then says, okay, here, I'm paying you with this carcass, then by that time the carcass will be only worth 25. And so he would have to pay more. So it actually helps out the mazik to say that the nevela belongs to the nizak immediately immediately at the time of the injury. Baruch Adonai leolam, amen v'amen.